The sea never forgets. Some say it keeps the names of the lost written somewhere beneath the tide, waiting for those who dare to return. Nathan Cole hadn't spoken to another soul in months. He lived alone at the edge of Port Haven, a small harbor town on the coast of Maine, where fog rolled in like a memory that refused to fade. Every morning he brewed his coffee, watched the waves, and pretended the ocean wasn't whispering back. 10 years ago, Nathan was a Navy Special Operations medic aboard the carrier USS Valiant. One wrong call, one explosion, and his entire team vanished into fire and salt water. Since that night, he's been living like a ghost who never learned how to die. Then came the storm. The wind howled across the docks, tearing at the old ropes, and out of that chaos, the sea sent something back, a shape, half drowned, tangled in kelp and oil. A dog, a German shepherd. When Nathan pulled him from the surf, the animal's eyes opened, pale, amber, steady, and knowing. He named him Shadow, and in that moment, Nathan didn't realize it yet, but the sea had just returned his past. An admission he thought had died with the Valiant was calling him home once more. The harbor had its own kind of silence, not the peaceful kind, but the heavy, breathing kind, like the world was holding its breath. Every morning, when the fog rolled in from the Atlantic, it swallowed the little town of Port Haven whole. The gulls vanished, the waves softened, and the lighthouse became nothing more than a faint pulse in the mist. That was when Nathan Cole came alive. He woke before dawn, the same way he used to on the carrier. Coffee, silence, routine. He didn't need an alarm, the sea did that for him. The first horn from the docks at 5:38 am was his reveille, the hiss of the kettle his marching drum. Nathan lived in a weathered cabin at the edge of the cliffs, the old home of his father, a Navy mechanic who'd spent most of his life fixing ships that were already broken. The cabin smelled of oil, salt, and rust. A single photo hung over the fireplace, a younger Nathan grinning beside another man in fatigues, Ethan Ward. Nathan hadn't looked at that picture in years, not really, but it was always there, watching, waiting. The USS Valiant had gone down 10 years ago off the coast of Bahrain. A single explosion, one flash of light, and everything Nathan knew was gone. He could still see it. When he closed his eyes, Ethan's face half lit by the emergency beacon, shouting over the alarms, "We're out of time. Nate, go." He never went. Not fast enough, not far enough. Nathan was the only one who made it back, and for 10 long years, he'd been living like a man who didn't deserve to. He kept busy. He always kept busy. He worked at docks, repaired old motors, that helped fishermen tune their radios. But at night, when the fog drifted in again, he'd sit by the window and watch the lights of the trawlers fade into the dark. That was when the voices came, the sound of boots on metal, the sharp clang of steel, the Valiant calling him back. On the morning it happened, the sea looked wrong, the horizon was flat as glass, and the gulls were nowhere to be seen. Nathan poured his coffee, black as motor oil, and turned on the old transistor radio. The announcer's voice crackled through static. Decommissioned carrier USS Valiant scheduled to be dismantled at Port Haven shipyard next week. The mug slipped from his hand and shattered on the counter. The smell of coffee filled the room. For a long moment, he didn't move. He just stood there, staring at the radio, until the silence grew too loud to ignore. That ship was supposed to be gone, swallowed by the sea, along with everything that happened on it. The idea that it was coming home now, broken and hollow, felt like a cruel joke from whatever god still watched over the waves. Nathan walked down to the docks that afternoon. The fog had lifted, but the air still smelled like rain and diesel. He could see the cranes in the distance, the silhouettes of men working around a massive, rusted hull being tugged toward shore. Even from miles away, he recognized the faded lettering along the bow, USS Valiant. It didn't look like a ship anymore. It looked like a corpse. Nathan's chest tightened. He turned away before anyone noticed him. He didn't want to answer questions, didn't want to hear condolences. He walked until the dock ended, then kept walking across the rocks, through the wind, until he reached the edge of the cliffs. The ocean below churned like it was trying to speak. "You don't get to come back," he whispered. "Not after what you took." The waves didn't answer. They never did. That night, the storm came. The kind of storm that made fishermen pray and children cry. The wind clawed at the windows. The sea crashed against the rocks. And Nathan sat by the fire, listening to the roof groan under the weight of rain. He tried to read. He couldn't. He tried to sleep. He didn't. Sometime past midnight, a sound cut through the storm below. Broken noise, carried on the wind. At first, Nathan thought it was just the gulls, caught in the current. But it came again, softer this time. Almost human. A whimper maybe. A cry. He grabbed his flashlight and his raincoat. stepping out into the storm. The wind hit him like a wall. Sheets of rain blurred the world into gray. The sound came again, closer now, somewhere near the rocks below. Nathan climbed down the narrow path, his boots slipping on wet stone. The beam of his flashlight cut across the waves and then froze. There, tangled in seaweed and oil, was a shape. A dog, a large German shepherd, its fur matted and dark with blood, one paw twitching weakly against the sand. Its breathing was shallow, but it was breathing. "Hey, easy," Nathan murmured, kneeling beside it. The rain hit them both in sheets, washing the salt from its coat. "You're okay. You're okay, buddy." The animal didn't move, but its eyes opened, pale, amber, glossy, filled with something that didn't belong in the eyes of an animal. Recognition. Nathan froze. That look, it was the same look Ethan had given him through the flames of the Valiant's deck. A look that said, "Don't leave me." For a moment, Nathan couldn't breathe. Then instinct took over. He tore off his coat, wrapped the dog inside, and carried it up the cliffs. The wind howled around them, but he kept going step after step, muscles burning, heart pounding like it hadn't in years. By the time he reached the cabin, both of them were shaking. Nathan laid the dog on the floor near the fire, grabbed a towel, and started wiping away the salt and blood. The wounds were deep, too deep for any stray to survive, but there was something else to clean. Sharp edge of a gunshot wound, a bullet grace, not an accident. "What the hell happened to you?" Nathan whispered. The dog's chest rose and fell. Barely. He grabbed his old field kit, the one he swore he'd never open again, and went to work. Needle, thread, pressure, bandage. His hands remembered what to do, even if his mind didn't want to. Hours passed. The storm eased. The fire burned low. Finally, when it was done, Nathan leaned back and looked at the creature lying on the floor, wrapped in blankets and breathing steady. "Guess we're both still alive," he muttered. The dog stirred, just slightly, as if answering him. "You need a name," Nathan said after a while. "Can't just keep calling you, hey, you." He looked toward the window. The storm clouds were breaking, and for a moment, the moonlight fell across the cabin, casting the dog's shadow long and dark across the floorboards. "Shadow," he said softly. "Yeah, that fits." The dog didn't react. Not really, but Nathan could have sworn that, just before his eyes closed, the corners of its mouth twitched almost like a smile. Outside, the storm drifted out to sea, carrying the last of the night with it. Inside, for the first time in 10 years, Nathan Cole wasn't thinking about death. He was thinking about the living thing breathing beside him, and the strange, impossible feeling that, somehow, the ocean had just brought something back he didn't know he'd been missing. Something loyal, something alive, something that would, before long, lead him straight back to the ghost he'd been running from all his life. Dawn came slow over Port Haven, crawling across the gray Atlantic like a tired soldier. The storm had passed, but the world still smelled of salt and ash. Nathan hadn't slept. He sat beside the fireplace, the same way he used to sit beside a hospital bed waiting for someone who might never wake up. The dog's shadow lay wrapped in an old blanket, chest rising shadowly, a faint tremor running through his legs each time the fire cracked. His fur was still damp, streaked with dried blood and salt. Nathan poured a little water into a bowl and set it beside him. Then he started to clean again, slower this time, more deliberate. Every movement was careful, measured, the way he'd been taught years ago when he wore a different uniform and had a purpose. He wiped the wounds with warm saline, his fingers tracing over old scars hidden beneath the new ones. Shadow didn't flinch. He just breathed steady, quiet. "You got lucky, buddy," Nathan muttered, threading a needle with his trembling hands. "A few inches the other way, and you'd be out there with the rest of them." He tied off the first stitch, his voice breaking just slightly. "You're luckier than a lot of people I knew out there." He didn't need to say where there was. The word hung in the air like smoke. His hands moved automatically, clamp, tie, snip, bandage, and with each motion another piece of that old life surfaced, the taste of sand, the smell of diesel, the screams over the radio. His breathing slowed, his shoulders tensed. For a moment, it wasn't a dog on the floor. It was a man, a friend. "Ethan, we're out of time." "Nate, go." Nathan closed his eyes. The needle slipped. Blood welled up on his finger. He didn't even feel it. "Not this time." He whispered, more to himself than to the animal. "You're not dying on me, too." By noon, the rain had stopped completely. Sunlight bled weakly through the curtains, catching the steam rising from Nathan's coffee mug. Shadow was alive, barely, but alive. His breathing had steadied. The worst of the bleeding had stopped. Nathan leaned back in the chair, rubbing his temples. He hadn't realized how much noise silence could make until now. The tick of the clock, the distant horn from the docks, the creak of the old wooden floorboards. "Guess it's just you and me," he murmured. Shadow didn't respond, not yet, but his ears twitched, as if he'd heard every word. The first time Shadow opened his eyes, it was dusk. Nathan was dozing in the chair, a book half open on his chest. The dog stirred. His breathing changed, and Nathan was awake in an instant the way soldiers wake, ready for anything. The amber eyes were open now, clearer than before, catching the light of the fire. They didn't look like an animal's eyes. They looked human. Nathan froze. He'd seen that look before, the same calm defiance, the same quiet understanding. Ethan's eyes, the moment before the blast. For a second, it felt like time folded in on itself, the cabin fading, replaced by flashing lights, alarms, smoke. His breath caught in his throat. Then Shadow blinked, and the illusion broke. He gave a weak, throaty sound, half whine, half sigh, and laid his head back down. "Yeah," Nathan said softly. "I know, pal. You've been through hell." He reached out, hesitated, then rested a hand gently on Shadow's head. The dog didn't pull away. He just closed his eyes, leaning ever so slightly into the touch. It was the first time Nathan had touched another living thing in years. Something in his chest, something rusted and cold, shifted. Days passed, slowly, quietly. Nathan fell into a rhythm again, not the old one, not quite, but something new. Every morning he boiled water, cleaned the wounds, changed the bandages. Every night he sat by the fire and talked, not because the dog could understand, but because silence was heavier when it didn't have words to carry it. "You remind me of someone," he'd say, pouring food into a bowl. Stubborn, always getting himself into places he shouldn't. Shadow would just watch him, ears perked, tail motionless. "Don't look at me like that," Nathan muttered. "I'm not getting soft," but he was. The nights grew easier. The dreams came less often. When they did, they weren't of fire and screaming anymore. They were of water, of silence, of amber eyes in the dark. For the first time in a decade, Nathan slept through the night. And when he woke, the first thing he saw wasn't the past, it was the dog curled beside the fire, breathing steadily. One evening, about a week after the storm, Nathan took Shadow outside. The air was sharp, clean, the sky bleeding gold over the horizon. The waves crashed against the cliffs below, and somewhere far off, the shipyard cranes groaned. Shadow walked slowly, still favoring his injured leg, but he was stronger, curious. His nose moved constantly, catching scents, the ocean carriage from miles away. Nathan leaned on the fence, watching the sea. "Haven't been out here in years," he said quietly. "Didn't think I'd miss it." Shadow looked up at him, head tilted. "Don't give me that look. You don't even know what I'm talking about." The dog blinked, then sat beside him. Nathan chuckled, a small sound, awkward, like someone trying to remember how laughter worked. "All right, maybe you do." They stayed there until the sun sank below the horizon. The wind carried the scent of diesel and rust from the shipyard, and for a moment, Nathan thought he could hear the faint echo of voices, sailors, laughter, a bell ringing across the harbor. He shook it off. Just memory, just ghosts. That night, the dreams didn't come at all. Nathan slept deep and dreamless, the kind of sleep that feels like forgiveness. When he woke, the light was pale and soft, spilling across the floorboards. Shadow was gone from his blanket. "Shadow," Nathan called, sitting up. No answer. He grabbed his boots and stepped outside. The morning was cold and still. The gulls circled low, their cries sharp against the quiet. Then he saw him standing on the cliff's edge, body rigid, ears forward, staring out at the sea. Nathan followed his gaze. Out there, beyond the fog line, the silhouette of a massive ship loomed in the distance. The USS Valiant. Its gray hull caught the light like an old scar, the cranes moving around it like carrion birds. Shadow let out a low growl. Then, suddenly, he barked, one sharp, echoing sound that sliced through the wind. Nathan felt something twist in his chest. "What is it, boy?" he whispered. "What do you see?" Shadow barked again, louder this time, tail stiff, muscles tense. The sound rolled down the cliffs, across the rocks, out toward the ship like a challenge. Nathan took a step closer, heart pounding. The air felt different, charged, alive, easy. He murmured, "It's just a ship," but Shadow didn't move. His gaze stayed fixed on that ghostly shape in the water, and for a fleeting second, Nathan thought he saw something, a flicker of light on the horizon, like a signal flash, a reflection, maybe, or something else. The wind shifted, the ship's horn bellowed once deep, low, mournful. Shadow's fur bristled. Nathan's breath caught in his throat. "All right," he said softly. "Let's go home." But even as he turned, the dog stayed rooted to the spot, eyes locked on the distant carrier of the ship that had taken everything from him. And Nathan Cole knew, with a slow, rising certainty, that whatever had washed ashore that night wasn't just a stray. Shadow had come from the sea for a reason, and the sea wasn't done with either of them yet. The days bled together, gray skies over gray water, the wind carrying that same hollow smell of rust and rain. From the porch, Nathan could see the USS Valiant every morning. Now, she loomed at the far end of Port Haven's shipyard, a blackened skeleton of steel, half submerged in the harbor fog. Cranes picked her apart, piece by piece, stripping the old warship of her armor, her dignity, her ghosts. The townspeople called it the salvage, but Nathan knew better. It wasn't dismantling, it was desecration. Every clang of metal against metal carried like a heartbeat across the water, and each time it echoed. Shadow would lift his head, stare toward the docks, and growl low in his throat, not out of fear, but recognition. Nathan tried to ignore it. He told himself the dog was reacting to noise, to the smell of oil and machinery, but deep down, he knew better. Shadow didn't just hear the ship, he remembered it. One evening, the sky turned a bruised shade of purple. Nathan stood at the kitchen window, coffee in hand, watching the cranes move like slow, skeletal giants. The reflection of the harbor lights shimmered across the glass, gold on black, like lanterns drifting through water. Behind him, Shadow paced the floor, restless, nails clicking softly against the wood. "What's got into you?" Nathan asked. "You've been on edge all day." Shadow stopped at the door, staring. His body was tense, ears pricked. "No," Nathan said firmly. "We're not going out tonight. There's a storm coming." The wind answered for the dog, a long moan that rattled the windows and pushed rain against the panes. But Shadow didn't move. His gaze was fixed on something beyond the house, something Nathan couldn't see, or maybe refused to. Finally, Nathan sighed, setting his mug down. "Fine, just for a walk." The harbor after dark had its own kind of silence, thick, uneasy, filled with the echoes of things better left unsaid. The cranes were motionless now, looming like shadows frozen mid. The storm clouds above pulsed with faint flashes of lightning, distant but closing in. Nathan walked a narrow pier, boots studding against the wet planks. Shadow trotted a few steps ahead, head low, tail stiff. Moving with a sense of purpose Nathan couldn't quite place. "Where are you taking me?" Nathan muttered, pulling his jacket tighter. The dog stopped suddenly at the far end of the pier where the floodlights from the shipyard didn't reach. Nathan followed, squinting into the dark. That's when he saw them. Footprints. Fresh ones. Not from a worker. These weren't the heavy, steel-toed prints of a dockhand. They were lighter, smaller, running parallel to the waterline before vanishing into the shadows near the break. Nathan crouched, touching the edge of one print. The shape was clear-treaded, military issue. "What the hell?" he whispered. Shadow growled softly, the sound rumbling deep in his chest. "Easy," Nathan said, standing slowly. His eyes followed the tracks toward the direction of the carrier. The path ended near a stack of shipping crates, but beyond that, open water. Unless his gaze shifted, a small service skiff, half covered by a tarp, rocked gently against the dock. Nathan's stomach tightened. Someone's been out there, back at the cabin. The wind picked up, battering the shutters. Nathan dried Shadow with an old towel, though his mind was miles away, tracing the footprints, the boat, the shadows beneath the cranes. He sat by the fire, staring at the rifle mounted above the mantel. It hadn't been touched in years. He reached up, pulled it down. The wood felt heavier than he remembered. Shadow lay nearby, eyes half closed, breathing slow until Nathan reached for the first aid kit. The sound of the latch snapping open made the dog lift his head immediately. Ears forward. "Relax," Nathan said, "just checking something." He crouched beside Shadow, unwrapping the bandage around the dog's side. The wound had healing well, but something about it had been gnawing at him since the storm. The shape, the angle. Nathan leaned closer, squinting in the firelight. The edges of the wound were smoothed to clean for claws or debris, and embedded just beneath the skin. He caught the faintest glint of metal. His heart slowed. "No," he whispered. He fetched his tweezers, held his breath, and pulled a small, flattened slug plinked onto the wooden floor. He turned it in his hand. A bullet, not a hunting round. Military issue. 556th NATO. "Jesus," Nathan murmured. He looked at Shadow. "Who the hell shot you?" "Boy." Shadow said nothing, of course, but his eyes met Nathan's. Calm, knowing, almost mournful, as if he understood the question all too well. Nathan sat back, exhaling slowly. "You didn't drift in by chance, did you?" The fire cracked, throwing sparks across the room. Outside, thunder rolled across the bay. "Somebody tried to kill you," Nathan said quietly, "and you came from there." He turned toward the window, where the distant lights of the valley shimmered faintly through the storm. What's going on out there? He poured a glass of whiskey, but it didn't steady his hands. Memories crawled up from the depths' faces. Names, orders, shouted through static. Valiant had been his coffin once. He'd sworn never to set foot near her again. But something was wrong, something alive. He couldn't shake the image of those footprints. He pictured someone out there now, someone armed, maybe hiding inside the wreck, doing God knows what. Salvage crews weren't supposed to work at night, so who was on that ship after dark? You want me to go back, don't you? He said to Shadow. The dog didn't move. He just watched the window, muscles tense, as thunder rumbled closer. I can't, Nathan whispered. You don't understand. That ship, that's where everything ended. He closed his eyes, and for a moment, he was back there again, the alarms, the screaming metal, Ethan's hand gripping his shoulder. Go, Nate, get clear. Then the explosion, when he opened his eyes. His hand was shaking. The whiskey glass shattered against the floor. Shadow rose, tail stiff, eyes fixed on him. He took one step forward, then another, resting his head against Nathan's knee, steady, silent, grounding him. Nathan let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. You really think there's something out there? Shadow didn't blink. All right then, Nathan muttered. If we go together. The storm hit just after midnight. Rain swept sideways across the harbor, waves slamming into the break wall like cannon fire. The power flickered once, then died. The town went black except for the faint glow of the shipyard lights in the distance. Nathan stood at the dock, soaked through, pulling the top off the old skiff. Shadow jumped in first, settling near the bow, eyes fixed on the horizon. You sure about this? Nathan asked. A flash of lightning answered him, stark white against the sea, illuminating the massive outline of the Valiant beyond the fog. Nathan gritted his teeth, untied the rope, and pushed off. The motor sputtered to life, coughing smoke before settling into a low hum. The wind tore at his jacket, rain stinging his face as he steered into the black water. The Caria loomed ahead, a silent giant waiting in the storm, her broken deck lights flickering like dying stars. Every part of Nathan screamed to turn back, but the look in Shadow's eyes, that unshakable focus, that instinct kept him moving forward. You better be right about this, he said over the roar of the rain. The waves slammed against the hull, rocking the skiff hard. He tightened his grip on the wheel, jaw clenched. Ethan, if you can hear me out there, he muttered, I'm going back into the fire, just one more time. Lightning split the sky, revealing the carrier's ruined deck rising out of the dark, black and twisted, dripping with rain. Shadow barked once, sharp and commanding, as if giving the order. Nathan throttled forward. The skiff slammed against the Valiant's rusted hull. He threw a rope over a jagged rail, tying it off with practiced hands. The storm howled around them, rain hammering the steel like bullets. Nathan climbed the ladder, Shadow close behind. When his boots hit the deck for the first time in 10 years, something inside him cracked, a soundless fracture deep in his chest. The deck was slick, covered in puddles and oil. The cranes above swayed in the wind like dying beasts. God help me, Nathan whispered. Then, from somewhere inside the carrier sound, a metallic clang, faint but deliberate. Shadow's ears shot up. Nathan raised his flashlight, heart hammering. You heard that too, he said. The dog growled, low and steady. The ship groaned beneath their feet, alive again in the storm. Nathan took a step forward, the beam of light cutting through the dark. All right, he murmured. Let's see what secrets you've been keeping, old girl. Together, man and dog disappeared into the hollow belly of the USS Valiant, swallowed once more by the sea in the past. The sea had gone quiet, too quiet. Nathan's small boat drifted in the black swell, the beam from his headlamp cutting through mist and rain like a blade. Ahead, rising from the ink-dark water, the USS Valiant loomed like a rusted carcass, half submerged, half freezing to die. The letters Valiant were barely visible on the corroded hull, eaten by salt and time. Chains clanked against metal as the waves shoved against her flank. Every sound echoed, too long, too hollow, like the ship was breathing in its sleep. Shadow stood at the bow, fur bristling against the rain, staring straight ahead. He hadn't made a sound since they left shore, but his body was tense, alert, as if he already knew what waited inside. Nathan felt it too. The air here was heavier. Old oil and seawater mixed into a sour scent that burned in his nose. A memory came uninvited, the same smell on the day the Valiant burned. He cut the engine, and silence swallowed them whole. Only the steady thump of waves against steel remained, like the heartbeat of something enormous. Waiting, Nathan threw a rope, anchored the boat, and climbed up the side ladder slick with algae and rain. His boots met the metal deck with a low, echoing clang. For a moment, he just stood there, drenched, staring down the length of the ship. The flashlight beam skimmed across twisted railings, shattered panels, and a lifeboat split in half. The Valiant had once been a living thing, a humming world of men, machines, and purpose. Now it was a corpse, and Nathan had returned to its grave. He moved quietly through the corridors, each step followed by the faint pattering of shadow behind him. The walls wept rust. Every turn seemed to hum with memory, laughter echoing down the mess hall, the smell of burnt coffee, the metallic ring of wrenches in the engine bay. He'd walked these halls once in his 20s, full of strength, full of direction. Now he was a ghost retracing his own footsteps. Then a flicker, a light, faint, artificial, moving. Nathan froze. Someone else was here. He killed his flashlight, crouched low, and listened. Voices, two of them, one male, one female. The woman's voice trembled, a sound of restraint, not fear. The man spoke low, controlled, with a tone Nathan recognized instantly. Command. He followed the sound down the narrow passage, keeping to the shadows. His pulse thudded in his ears. When he reached the junction near the old maintenance bay, he peeked through a crack in the bulkhead door. Inside, a man stood near a cluster of crates, holding a flashlight in one hand, a pistol in the other. He was built like a soldier, rigid stance, squared shoulders, haircut military short even under the rain. Across from him, bound to a railing with rope, was a woman. Her hair was plastered to her face, a jacket torn, but her eyes sharp, steady, met Nathan's through the sliver of the door. For a split second, the world held its breath. Her gaze flicked down, then up again, 3 quick blinks. Her fingers twitched behind her back, pressing against the metal post. ... Nathan blinked. SOS. Old Navy code, almost extinct. The woman wasn't just trapped, she was trained. Nathan's throat tightened, and then it hit him. He knew that face, older now, but unmistakable. Hannah Ward, Ethan's sister. The last time he'd seen her was at the memorial service 10 years ago. She'd stood by the dock, silent, staring out to sea as the folded flag was handed to her. Nathan had tried to speak to her that day, but guilt had locked his jaw shut. He couldn't tell her that he'd been the one who made the call that sent Ethan below deck. Now here she was alive, bound, and signaling him from inside the wreck of their ship. The man with her turned slightly, revealing a face worn but cold. A thin scar cut across his jawline. On his vest, Nathan saw a faded navy patch torn, but legible LT Henshaw. The name rang faint bells. He'd been a logistics officer on a nearby carrier back then. What the hell was he doing here, armed, on a restricted salvage vessel? Nathan eased back, his mind racing. Henshaw wasn't supposed to be here. None of this made sense. Shadow let out a low, almost inaudible growl. Nathan's hand dropped to calm him, but too late. Something clattered down the hallway behind them. A wrench, loosened by vibration or maybe the ship's shifting weight, rolled across the floor with a metallic clang. Henshaw's head snapped up. Who's there? Flashlight beams sliced across the darkness. Nathan ducked, but the light caught the edge of his jacket. A shout followed, boots stopping. He sprinted down the corridor, Shadow at his heels, the sound of gunfire exploding behind them, bullets ricocheting off the walls in showers of sparks. He dove behind a bulkhead, breathing hard. The smell of cordite filled the air. One bullet grazed the wall near his shoulder. Too damn close. Come out. Henshaw's voice thundered through the hall. You've got no business here, Cole. Nathan froze. He knew his name. How the hell did he? Yeah, I know who you are, Henshaw continued, footsteps drawing closer. The ghost medic of the Valiant. Guess the sea didn't want you either. Nathan clenched his jaw. That voice carried venom, personal, not random. He looked down at Shadow. The dog's fur was wet, eyes burning like amber fire in the dark. Nathan whispered, "Stay low." He peered around the corner, saw Henshaw moving slowly, methodically. A hunter. Behind him, Hannah struggled against her ropes, trying to keep him distracted. Her voice cracked through the echoes. "Don't do this, Henshaw. You're not quiet," he snapped. Shoving her back, the light hit her face, and Nathan saw the terror she was trying to hide. Nathan's hand went to his pack. He still carried a small field kit, a relic from his medic days, but it wasn't a weapon. Not yet. He scanned the floor, spotted a loose valve wheel leaning against the wall. He took a slow breath, picked it up, and flung it down the opposite corridor. It clanged loudly. Henshaw turned instantly and fired. Nathan moved fast. He lunged from cover, tackled Henshaw's arm, and the gun skidded across the deck. The two men slammed into the railing with a grunt, each fighting for control. Years of training snapped back into Nathan's muscles like a ghost reflex. But Henshaw was strong, rage strong. He swung, connecting with Nathan's jaw. Pain burst wide in his vision. They stumbled, slipping on rainwater leaking through the hull cracks. Then Shadow launched from the darkness, teeth flashing. He hit Henshaw's shoulder, tearing into his sleeve, dragging him sideways. Henshaw yelled, smashing his elbow down, trying to shake him off. Nathan grabbed the gun, swung it up, but the ship lurched with a violent tilt. A crate fell, metal screamed. The flashlight crashed to the floor, spinning madly before dying out completely. Darkness swallowed everything. Only the sound of waves and ragged breathing remained. When the emergency light flickered on again, red and dim, Henshaw was gone. Only his echo lingered. Somewhere deeper in the ship, Nathan staggered to Hannah, cutting her ropes with a small knife from his belt. She winced as the circulation returned to her wrists. "Are you hurt?" he asked, voice low but urgent. She shook her head, staring at him in disbelief. "Nathan Cole, I thought you were dead." He almost smiled. "Not yet." Her eyes softened, but there was no time for reunion. Above them, thunder rolled. The Valiant groaned under the storm's weight. Water began seeping through the floor grates. "What the hell's going on here?" Nathan demanded. "Why was he holding you?" Hai looked toward the shadows, where Henshaw had disappeared. "He's looking for something," she whispered. "Something left on this ship. He said it was classified, buried with the Valiant." Nathan's chest tightened. "Classified?" She nodded. "He thinks Ethan knew about it." Ethan, the name hit like a blow. Nathan glanced at Shadow, who stood rigid, eyes still fixed toward the flooded corridor. Then a sound echoed, metal scraping, followed by a single, deliberate footstep. Henshaw's voice, cold and steady, carried through the dark. "You shouldn't have come back, Cole. The dead don't like to be disturbed." The emergency lights flickered once more, and in that heartbeat of red glow, Nathan saw the glint of steel. The sea roared outside, swallowing their words, as the Valiant seemed to shudder in pain, a dying beast waking one last time. The storm had turned the Valiant into a coffin of thunder and steel. Every sound, the groan of the hull, the slap of waves, the hiss of leaking pipes, felt alive, watching, listening. Nathan crouched low beside the corridor hatch, pulse hammering in his throat. The emergency lights pulsed in slow, bloody beats. Across the hall, Henshaw's shadow moved with surgical patience, boots splashing through ankle-deep water, pistol raised, eyes scanning every inch. Nathan motioned for Hannah to stay back. "Don't move," he mouthed. She nodded, clutching her torn sleeve around her arm, eyes wide but steady. Nathan took a breath, forced his voice steady, and stepped into view. "Easy," he said. "I'm not your enemy." Henshaw's flashlight caught him square in the face. The barrel of his pistol followed. "What the hell are you doing on my ship?" Henshaw growled. Nathan raised both hands slightly. "I'm with the Port Authority. They sent me out to check the fuel leak reported from this sector. I thought the Valiant was empty." Henshaw's expression twisted, half disbelief, half amusement. "Fuel leak." He took a step closer. "You think I don't recognize you, Cole?" Nathan's stomach sank. The lie wouldn't hold. He could see it in the man's eyes. This wasn't about coincidence. This was personal. "Then you know I'm not here for you," Nathan said carefully. "I just want the girl safe. Let her go, and we walk out of here." Henshaw's smirk cut through the dark. "You think this is about her?" He lowered the gun, then lifted it again, aiming for Nathan's head. "You shouldn't have come back. You of all people should have stayed buried." The shot never came. Nathan lunged forward, driving his shoulder into Henshaw's arm. The pistol fired, deafening in the narrow corridor. Sparks flew as the bullet struck steel. The two men crashed against the bulkhead, fighting for the weapon. Henshaw was stronger, military strong, trained, strong. He slammed Nathan into the wall, elbowed him hard in the ribs, knocking the air from his lungs. Nathan staggered, swung wildly, caught Henshaw across the jaw, but the man barely flinched. He countered with a blow to Nathan's side that sent him sprawling. The gun clattered across the floor, sliding into a puddle. Henshaw grabbed Nathan by the collar, pressing the muzzle of a backup sidearm against his temple. "You always were a fool, Cole. Some ghosts need to stay dead." Nathan's vision blurred. His mind went silent. Then the door behind Henshaw exploded inward. A blur of wet fur and fury launched itself through the gap. Shadow. The German shepherd slammed into Henshaw's arm, teeth sinking into flesh. The gun went off once, twice, shots ripping through the ceiling. Henshaw shouted, spinning, trying to shake the dog loose. But Shadow held on, snarling, dragging him sideways. "Shadow," Nathan shouted. He grabbed a length of cable from the floor, swung it wide, and hooked it around Henshaw's wrist. The man stumbled, disoriented, blood spraying against the wall. Nathan drove forward, wrenching the gun from Henshaw's hand, slamming him into a storage locker. The impact rang through the ship. Henshaw hit the ground hard, gasping for air. Nathan moved fast, snatching a coil of rope from a nearby crate, binding Henshaw's wrists behind him. He pulled the knots tight, ignoring the blood running down his own face. "Stay down," Nathan hissed. Henshaw glared up at him, breathing through his teeth. "You don't know what you're interfering with, Cole. This ship wasn't meant to be found." Nathan tightened the rope. "Guess I missed the memo." He turned to Hannah. "Can you walk?" She nodded, shaky but determined. "Where now?" "The radio room," Nathan said. "If we can reach the Coast Guard someone before the storm kills the signal." They half ran through the corridor. Water poured from ceiling cracks, flooding the floor up to their ankles. The Valiant groaned around them, every rivet creaking like old bones. When they reached the radio control cabin, the door was half torn from its hinges. Inside, panels hung from the walls. Cables dangled like vines. The old main console was fried blackened circuits, cracked dials. Nathan's heart sank. The ship's communication system was dead. But on the counter, amid dust and rust, he spotted a field box marked emergency power supply. He snapped it open inside. A few corroded batteries and a hand-cranked dynamo. Old tech, but maybe enough. Hannah hovered behind him. "Can you fix it?" "I can try." He stripped a wire with his pocket knife, twisted the leads together, and began connecting the old power cells. Shadow lay by the doorway, chest heaving, eyes never leaving the hall. Nathan worked fast, his hands trembling from adrenaline and cold. He could hear the ship's hull shifting like the sea was trying to claim it again. Come on," he muttered. Finally, a faint click. A red light linked weakly on the radio panel. Nathan exhaled. "We've got life." He adjusted the dials, setting the frequency to 1420 MHz, the emergency maritime distress band. Then he pressed the transmitter. "This is Nathan Cole, Port Haven's Salvage Division," he said into the mic. His voice cracked through static. "We have 2 survivors aboard the USS Valiant. The vessel is unstable. Repeat, unstable. Immediate evacuation required." Only static replied. He glanced at Hannah. Her eyes searched his face. "Try again." He did, again and again. Between the bursts of static came fragments, crackling syllables. Faint but human. "Copy, this is Coast." Identify. Nathan leaned in, hope flaring. "This is Cole. We're on the Valiant. Coordinates 71 north, 43 west. We have 1 hostile detained in critical structural failure. We need extraction before dawn." The reply came broken, but clear enough. "Hold position. We're the clearing in 2 hours. Rescue inbound." Nathan dropped his head, relief flooding through him. "They heard us." Hannah's shoulders sagged, eyes wet. For the first time, she smiled, but the moment didn't last. A soft whine pulled Nathan's attention. Shadow, the dog, was lying halfway out the door, head lowered, one paw trembling against the deck. His chest rose unevenly, a wet stain spreading beneath his side. Nathan's blood went cold. He rushed over, kneeling beside him. His hands brushed through the soaked fur. Warm blood seeped between his fingers. The old wound reopened. The stitches he'd placed days ago had torn during the fight. "Damn it," Nathan whispered. "No." No. Shadow's eyes lifted weakly to meet his, that same steady amber gaze. The same look Ethan used to give him before every mission, wordless, trusting. Hannah knelt beside them. "Can you stop the bleeding?" "I can try," Nathan said, voice cracking. He tore open his medic pouch, pulling out gauze tape, a small vial of antiseptic. His hands moved automatically, muscle memory taking over. He pressed the dressing tight, murmuring under his breath like he had before. "You got lucky once. Buddy, don't push it." Outside, the storm screamed louder, waves hammering against the hull. The ship shuddered, but the 3 of them stayed there, huddled in that flickering red light. Time suspended between heartbeat and thunder. Shadow exhaled, slow and shaky, his head still lifted. His gaze found Nathan again, unblinking. Nathan placed a hand gently against his muzzle. "You stay with me, Shadow. You hear? We're almost home." For a long moment, the only sound was rain on steel and the faint crackle of the radio repeating through static. "Rescue inbound. Hold your position." Nathan looked toward Hannah, then back to the dog. His chest ached with a mix of gratitude and dread. The storm wasn't over. Neither was whatever had brought them here. But for now, in that dying ship, between the ghosts of their past and the howl of the sea, they were still alive, and that had to count for something. The storm had quieted by dawn. What remained was the kind of silence that comes after a confession, thick, heavy, almost sacred. The Valiant drifted in that pale gray light, anchored only by the weight of its ghosts. Water lapped gently against the hull. Somewhere deep inside the ship, a bulkhead creaked, sounding almost like a sigh. Nathan sat by the radio console, eyes heavy from exhaustion. The emergency light above him flickered weakly, throwing long shadows across the room. Shadow lay beside him, breathing shallow but steady. Nathan's hand rested on the dog's shoulder, feeling the faint rhythm beneath the fur life, fragile and stubborn. Hannah sat across from him, wrapped in a torn blanket. The storm had stripped her of all pretense. Her hair clung to her face, her voice raw but clear. "They said the Valiant went down in an accident," she began. "A systems failure during a weapons test. That's what the Navy told the families. That's what they told me." Nathan didn't answer. He didn't need to. He'd lived that life for 10 years. "But it wasn't an accident, was it?" she asked softly. Nathan's jaw tightened. "No." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded like she'd known the answer all along but needed to hear it aloud. "My brother," she said, "Ethan Ward. You served with him." Nathan's head lifted. The name hit him like a surge of cold water. Ethan's voice broke slightly. He didn't make it, I know." Her eyes filled, but she didn't look away. "He was my big brother." The room seemed to shrink around them. Nathan's mind flashed back fire. Alarms. Ethan's hand on his shoulder, shouting over the roar of chaos, "Get to the evac, Nate. Go." He swallowed hard. "He saved my life." Hannah's lips trembled. "He always did that, saving people who didn't want to be saved." Nathan looked down at Shadow. The dog's eyes flicked open, as if recognizing the name. Hannah followed his gaze and smiled faintly. "He remembers," she whispered. "He should." Shadow belonged to Ethan. Nathan blinked. "What?" "Ethan trained him. They served together in the K-9 unit before your mission on the Valiant. After the explosion, Shadow was found weeks later, half dead on a rescue raft, clinging to a piece of debris. The Navy classified him, said he was too unstable for redeployment. I took him home." Nathan glanced at the dog again, those amber eyes, steady and knowing. All this time he'd thought the bond between them was chance, but maybe chance had nothing to do with it. "He found me," Nathan murmured. Hannah nodded slowly. "He always had a way of finding Ethan. Maybe he just followed what was left of him." For a while, neither spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the radio and the distant crack of the waves. Then Hannah reached into the fold of a blanket and pulled out a small, waterproof drive, dented, covered in grime. "This is why Henshaw wanted me dead," she said. "This is what Ethan died for." Nathan frowned. "What's on it?" "Proof," she said. "The Valiant wasn't destroyed by a malfunction. It was testing an unapproved prototype, a next-generation kinetic payload, designed to detonate underwater. Ethan discovered it. He found out that Henshaw and a few officers were planning to sell the tech off the books." She paused, glancing toward Henshaw's unconscious form tied up in the corner. "When Ethan tried to report it, the explosion happened. Officially, he was listed as missing in action, but someone made sure his voice never reached command." Nathan's stomach twisted. The truth was worse than guilt. It was confirmation of every nightmare he'd had since that night. "So this whole time," he said quietly, "I was hating myself for something that wasn't even my fault." Hannah met his eyes. "It wasn't yours to carry, but you were the only one left who could finish what he started." Nathan rubbed his temples, staring at the drive. "You went after this alone." "I had to. The Navy shut every door, sealed every report. When I tracked the Valiant's wreckage here, I thought if I could just find proof of what happened, I could clear his name. Then Henshaw found me first." Nathan studied her. This woman who looked like Ethan when she clenched her jaw, when she refused to break even as her hands trembled. Courage ran in the family. He looked back at Shadow. "And he led you to me?" "I think so," she said softly. "He disappeared the night before I left for Port Haven. I thought I'd lost him, but maybe he was finding you." Nathan exhaled, the truth washing over him like the tide. All this time, he'd been running from ghosts: Ethan, the explosion, the guilt, and yet here, in the ruins of the same ship, he was still following Ethan's lead. The realization hit with a strange peace. "He's been watching over us," Nathan said quietly. "All this time." Hannah smiled faintly. "He believed in you, Nathan. Said you were the best medic he'd ever seen. Said if anything happened to him, you'd know what to do." Nathan felt something shift inside him, small, but undeniable. For the first time in years, the weight on his chest eased, even if just a little. He reached for the drive. "We'll get this to command. Make sure they can't bury it again." "Do you trust them to listen?" she asked. "No," Nathan said, "but I trust the truth to outlive the people who try to hide it." A low groan echoed through the hull. The ship tilted slightly, metal scraping against rock. They didn't have long. Nathan stood, stretching his sore limbs. "We'll need to move Henshaw before rescue gets here." "I don't want him talking first." Hannah nodded. "He'll twist everything." Shadow shifted beside them. Raising his head, he gave a short, low bark. Alert but calm, Nathan knelt, running his fingers through the fur between the dog's ears. "You brought her to me." "Brought us both back." Shadow leaned into the touch, tail thumping weakly against the floor. Nathan smiled, small, tired, but real. "Good boy." Hannah watched him, eyes glistening. "Ethan used to say Shadow had two purposes," she murmured, "to protect and to guide." Nathan looked at her. "He's done both." A burst of static cracked through the radio, cutting him off. "Coastgraph to Valiant. Visual on wreck. Evac inbound. Hold position." Nathan pressed the mic. "Copy that. We have one hostile in custody and 2 survivors. Proceed with caution. The hull's unstable." "Roger that. ETA 20 minutes. He turned to Hannah. "That's our ride home." She smiled faintly. "Home? Haven't heard that word in a long time." Nathan looked around the ruined control room, the corroded walls, the rusted bolts, the shadows of the past burned into steel. "Neither have I." For a moment, everything was still. The light filtered through the cracked window, soft and blue, painting the room in a quiet grace. Shadow shifted again, curling his body closer to Nathan's leg. His breathing steadied. Nathan brushed a hand along his side, murmuring softly, "You did good, buddy. Real good." Hannah leaned back against the wall, closing her eyes. "What will you do after this?" Nathan thought for a long moment. Maybe finally stop running. The radio crackled again, closer this time. The low hum of approaching rotors echoed faintly across the waves. He looked toward the open hatch, toward the horizon. The dawn had begun to burn through the clouds, gold threading through gray. "The sea never forgets," Nathan said quietly. "But maybe it forgives if you listen long enough." Hannah opened her eyes, following his gaze. "Or maybe it just sends back what you've lost." Nathan smiled faintly. "Maybe that too." He looked down at Shadow, resting at his feet, the living bridge between 2 men, 2 promises, and 2 unfinished lives. And for the first time since the Valiant exploded 10 years ago, Nathan felt whole, not healed, not yet, but whole. Outside, the waves calmed, as if the ocean itself had exhaled. Dawn came slow, like an old man waking from a long dream. The storm was gone, but its fingerprints lingered on the torn waves, the cracked hull, the weary faces of those who'd survived it. The Valiant lay still now, half swallowed by the sea. Its metal bones groaned with every swell. But there was a strange peace in it, a silence that felt almost holy. Nathan stood by the starboard deck, staring at the horizon. The air was sharp with salt and the smell of oil. The light was thin, washed in gray and gold, like the world was still deciding whether to begin again. Behind him, Hannah wrapped a bandage around her arm, the cut from the fight with Henshaw now dark and stiff. Shadow lay near the rail, head resting on his paws, eyes half open. His chest rose and fell slowly, each breath a battle one. Far off, the sound of rotor blades began to rise, faint at first, then growing clearer. A helicopter. Nathan exhaled. "They found us." Hannah shaded her eyes, watching the shape grow in the sky. "About time," she said, but her voice trembled with something that wasn't quite relief. When the Coast Guard finally descended, the air whipped into a frenzy of salt and wind. Two rescue divers dropped onto the deck, shouting over the noise, "United States Navy. Is anyone injured?" Nathan raised a hand, his voice hoarse. "We're fine." One hostile, restrained below deck. The rescuers moved fast, checking vitals, taking photos, securing the perimeter. One knelt beside Shadow, frowning. "He's hurt." Nathan crouched down, hand on the dog's neck. "He'll make it." The diver hesitated, then nodded. "We'll lift him first." The stretcher was lowered. Nathan helped guide Shadow onto it, steadying the straps as the winch lifted him skyward. The dog didn't whimper, didn't fight, just watched Nathan, those amber eyes locked on him until he disappeared into the belly of the helicopter. Then came Hannah, then Henshaw, bound, bruised, and silent, his eyes full of a venom that no storm could wash clean. Nathan was last, before boarding. He turned one final time. The Valiant loomed behind him, blackened, broken, yet somehow dignified. Like a soldier standing at attention one last time before the sea claimed him, he whispered under his breath, "Rest now, old girl." Then he climbed the rope and rose into the morning air. The helicopter cut through the dawn. From above, the ocean stretched endless, rippling with soft light. Hannah sat opposite Nathan, her hands clasped around something small and leather-bound. She caught him watching and gave a faint, tired smile. "I found this in Ethan's quarters before you came. I think it's meant for you." She held out the book. Nathan took it carefully. The cover was cracked, salt-stained. His hands trembled as he opened it. The handwriting was unmistakable, sharp, precise, familiar. Ethan Ward. He flipped through pages filled with short entries, sketches, fragments of thought. Then, near the back, he found the final lines, written in hurried strokes that had bled into the paper. "If I don't make it back, tell Nate the sea never betrayed anyone. It only tests whether we're brave enough to return." The words hit him harder than the storm ever had. Nathan blinked against the tears, but they came anyway, hot, stinging, unstoppable. He closed the book, pressing it to his chest, and for a long while said nothing. Hannah looked out the window, her voice barely a whisper. "He always said you had the heart of a tide. No matter how far it pulls away, it always comes back." Nathan laughed softly through the tears. "Yeah, always back to where it began." The helicopter veered north toward the mainland. Below, the Valiant grew smaller, just a rusted shadow drifting in the water, swallowed by the vast blue. Hours later, at the Port Haven Naval Base, the storm survivors were escorted into a medical tent. Floodlights hummed above them. Reporters swarmed outside the fence, hungry for a story about the miracle rescue. Nathan kept his head down, his voice low. When a naval officer tried to shake his hand, calling him a hero, he pulled back gently. "No heroes here," he said. "Just people trying to do the right thing." Hannah stood beside him, holding Ethan's journal. "You sure you don't want to give a statement?" "I've said enough to ghosts," Nathan replied. She smiled faintly. "Then what will you do? Disappear for a while? Let the sea keep the rest of the story." A medic came by to check on Shadow, who was resting on a blanket near the wall. His leg was stitched, his breathing steady now. When Nathan knelt beside him, the dog lifted his head weakly, pressing his nose against Nathan's palm. Nathan smiled. "You did good, partner." Shadow's tail gave one slow wag. By late afternoon, the crowds had thinned. The air smelled of rain and diesel. Nathan stood near the pier, watching the rescue ships dock and refuel. The sky had turned that pale, impossible blue that only comes after a storm clean. Fragile, infinite. Hannah approached quietly, her hair pulled back, her coat too big for her frame. "You're really leaving," she said. "I think it's time." She hesitated. "Where will you go?" He looked out toward the sea. "I don't know. Somewhere the noise can't reach." She nodded, eyes glistening. Ethan would have wanted that. Nathan turned to her, his voice softer now. "He'd be proud of you. You know, you didn't just chase the truth, you carried it." Her lips curved into a faint, bittersweet smile. "I think he'd say the same about you." For a moment, neither spoke. Then she held out the journal again. "Keep it. He wrote it for you." Nathan hesitated, then took it. "Thank you." She looked down at Shadow, who had settled beside Nathan's boots, head resting on its paws. "Take care of him too." "I will." The sun dipped low, painting the water in shades of gold and silver. Hannah took a step back, hands in her pockets. "Goodbye, Nathan." "Goodbye, Hannah." And with that, she turned and walked down the pier, her figure shrinking against the light until she was just another part of the horizon. Nathan stood there a long time after she'd gone. The wind tugged at his jacket, the gulls circling above like restless thoughts. He opened Ethan's journal again, reading the last page over and over until the words blurred. Then he whispered them aloud, like a prayer carried by the wind. "The sea never betrayed anyone. It only tests whether we're brave enough to return." He closed the book, tucking it into his coat. Shadow nudged his leg, tail brushing against the wood of the dock. Nathan crouched, meeting his gaze. "Thank you," he said softly, "for leading me home." The dog leaned closer, resting his head against Nathan's knee. The gesture was small, wordless, perfect. Nathan smiled. "Come on, buddy, let's go." They turned together, walking down the dock. The sun shimmered across the water, breaking into ripples that looked almost like paths leading back, forward, everywhere at once. For the first time in a decade, Nathan didn't feel lost, just carried far out at sea, where the wreck of the Valiant slept beneath the waves. The currents moved in slow, silent circles, gentle, eternal, unbroken. No sound reached that depth, no light either, only the quiet pulse of the ocean, keeping its secrets, forgiving those who'd returned to face them. And somewhere, between the sound of the wind and the whisper of the tide, a voice seemed to linger. "We can't choose which wave will hit us, but we can choose how to face it." And sometimes, in the silence of the sea, we hear the call to return to what we've lost. 3 figures, 1 man, 1 woman, 1 dog walked away from the wreck that morning. To the world, they were survivors, but to the sea, they were something else. 3 souls finally at peace with the tide.